Well, hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Sam. I am a student of the Bible. I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for 22 years, and I'm a writer. And my training involves biblical studies, theology, and biblical languages. Let's hop back into Genesis chapter 4. I'm tired of talking about Bible translation stuff. I'm really tired of talking about the ESV, okay? So I don't think I'm going to talk about that anymore. But let's hop into Genesis chapter 4 at the end. So we've been all the way through the story of Cain and Abel. At the very end, last video we did, we saw that we were in verse 15. We went all the way to verse 18, but I want to jump back to verse 15 because I think it informs where we're going to go with the story of Lamech. Okay, so verse 15 says, "But the Lord said to him, Yahweh said to Cain, not so," because he's afraid of being killed if he goes out of, away from mom and dad, and he's out wandering all by himself, and he's afraid of being killed, and so he says that to God, and God says, "Not so." Yahweh says, "Not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." This is God's promise to anyone, making a declaration, but specifically to Cain. Then the end of verse 15 says this, says, "Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him." And I talked about in the last video that we don't really know what this mark or this sign is. I want to read it in the Hebrew, but just because I think that it'll just become obvious. It's like we just don't know. Okay, so here is the Hebrew. I'm going to put it up on the screen so you can kind of read along, try to read along with it or whatever. But it's Vayasem Yahweh Lekayin out Lebilti Haukaut Voto. Or no, not voto. Sorry, that's backwards. Oto, Kal, and Moseo, or Moseao. And so what it means is, and set Yahweh on Cain a sign or a mark, lest or for fear that should kill him anyone finding him. Okay. So, sometimes reading it, I get backwards and read it the wrong way. That's a rookie mistake. But anyway, I put a translation on there because as I was translating it, I was like, I want to, put this in a better word order. So my translation is, "And Yahweh set a sign or a mark on Cain, lest for fear that anyone finds him should kill him." And so we're not really sure what that mark is. It could be a physical mark in his body. That's what usually people think of. But I showed last video that there is some scholarship out there that says maybe it's the city, it's the polis, it's this thing that would protect him, that he would. And I think what they don't say this in those 2 papers that I looked through. But as you study the rest of the Torah and you come to like Numbers, what you find is that there are these, as they're getting ready to enter the land, there are these commands from Yahweh to build cities of refuge for people who accidentally murder someone and they're running away from the people who want to take vengeance against them. And so they run to a city of refuge. And so it could be that that's what the 2 papers that I wrote, that maybe that's what they had in view. They're thinking, oh, this is written later on, and they're writing and they're adding in that part of the story. I don't know. It wasn't in either one of those papers that I wrote that was explicitly what they were doing, but it could be. I don't know. But there's not consensus on this. Okay, so this mark, this sign, whatever it was. But the beginning of verse 15 really informs what we're going to talk about with Lamech. And so we looked at Cain's lineage, and we see Lamech, which Lamech is the 7th son from Adam on Cain's side. And he's a fascinating dude. Now, names are starting to mean something, okay? So we talked about that in the last couple videos, that Adam means the man. Eve means mother of the living or living. And Cain, his name is Cain, and in Hebrew, and it sounds a lot like I acquired, the word for I acquired. Abel doesn't have an equivalent that we pick up from the text. It doesn't, like she said, I named him Abel because it's like this, like she does with Cain. But Abel sounds a lot like Hebel, that word in Hebrew, which means quickly fleeting or going away soon, kind of a deal. Which it's kind of like, that's a sad name. If that's what she named him like. But we get to Lamech, and Lamech, we're not sure what his name means. It could mean conqueror, though. which maybe that's why he comes out like he does later on in this passage. But here we get in verse 19, Lamech married two women, one named Adah and the other named Zillah. Now, this is the very first time in the Hebrew scriptures we have polygamy. And this is going to be kind of a theme running through a lot of the Hebrew scriptures, is that there's a lot of people a lot of men, there's hardly any women who are like, there's not like a positive story where, she had 3 or 4 husbands. But there are a lot of dudes who have wives, a lot of wives. So here's Lamech. He's like the very first story of this here. But then you kind of keep going on with the story and you see like, Abraham ends up like having his wife plus side chick. Sorry, that was kind of terrible. And then you see that Jacob has a lot of, he has 2 wives and then concubines and handmaids, what they're called. And then you have, you get like later on, you find David. He's got multiple wives. Moses, I think he ends up having a couple different wives. I'm not sure if they're all at the same time. I'd have to go back and look at that. But then you have Solomon. And here's the deal. God's silent about it all. This is what I wanted to say. Like, it doesn't seem like God has much to say about polygamy. And, people have wrestled with this back and forth. Well, this is, not prescriptive. This is descriptive and just kind of saying what happened. God isn't really cool with it. We don't know. I mean, either way, God doesn't say much about the whole thing at all. The only thing that we find in this whole thing is Genesis chapter 2 at the very end, when it says, this is the reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and the two will be united and become one flesh, the man and the wife. That's it. That's all but we don't see God condemning it. We don't see God praising it. We just see it happening. And God doesn't seem to say anything about it at all. Okay, so here's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, hey, run out because God doesn't say anything about it. Run out and do it. Like, I don't love it when people do that with the Bible. He just pretty silent on the issue. Okay. So here's the deal. These wives, their names mean something. Okay. So the word Adah means, beauty or like an ornament, pleasurable kind of a thing. Like she's beautiful to look at. And the other wife, Zillah, means shade. There's a joke there somewhere. Okay, so I used to be a youth pastor, and I probably would have told that joke in youth ministry. Like, here's the one wife who's the beautiful one, and here's the other wife that's shade. Kind of like, but it's said that some scholars think that the reason that shade is because maybe she had really beautiful hair covering herself. I don't have any idea. I don't think that's. It could be, could not be. I don't know. But then Zillah has a daughter, and that daughter's name is Naamah, which means loveliness. So Lamech has like kind of a thing for exterior looks, it seems. Then there's the boys. There's 3 boys that are born. There is Jabal, there is Jubal, and then there is Tubal-Cain. Okay, so Jabal, it says he's the father of all those who live in tents and take care of livestock, shepherds, all that kind of stuff. Then there's Jubal, who is the father of all the musicians, the stringed instruments, the flutes, all that. I'm a guitar player, so Jubal is my dude. And then with Zillah, her son is named Tubal-Cain, and Tubal-Cain is the father of all who worked with bronze and iron, and he set up people to do that. He's a metal worker. So everybody has their own trade, has their own thing. They're building this city, and they're able to live off of what they're doing here. So civilization is advancing very quickly in this city outside of east of Eden. But here's the rest of this story. It's all focused on Lamech, and it ties back to verse 15. It says, Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. So we should pay attention. If you're a student of Hebrew, you'll know this is Hebrew parallelism, okay? There are 6 lines here, 2 line to line to a pair, line to line a pair, line to line a pair. They're going to say the same thing, but different words in different ways. Okay, so Adah and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. This is Lamech arrogantly boasting about the fact that some young dude kind of beat him up or injured him, and so he killed the guy for it. And now he's telling his wives, listen, here's the deal. If Cain killed his brother and he was going to be avenged 7 times for doing that, then I should be avenged 77 times. This boastful, bragging thing. And remember, Cain didn't say that about himself. God said that about Cain. Lamech is saying that about himself. And this is the last thing we even hear from any of Cain's side of his whole family tree. Like, we don't ever hear from these people ever again. In fact, I don't think we hear the names of them outside of Genesis chapter 4. We hear Cain's name maybe later in the New Testament, but we don't really hear about Lamech and all this. We do, however, in Genesis chapter 5, have some names that sound an awful lot like Cain's family tree. And they are actually attributed to Seth's family tree. And so that's going to be fascinating. We'll get to that in the next video. And we're going to talk about how this really, chapter 4 and chapter 5, feel like there's a giant chasm between the two of them. Like when you get to chapter 5, it feels like chapter 2, 3, and 4 didn't even exist. And chapter 5 is a restart of all of this. And I think it's on purpose, and it feels that way because it feels like a stitch. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the next video. But we got to get through 25 and then 26. So Adam made love to his wife again. So at the very beginning of the chapter, that's what we find. And then at the end of the chapter, that's what we find. And she gave birth to a son and named him Seth. And Seth probably means given or granted to them. And it's kind of like this is the son to replace the other sons, granted to him. And she says, God has granted me another child in place of Abel since Cain killed him. So Seth also had a son, and he named him Enosh. And at that time, people began to call on or proclaim the name of the Lord. And that's chapter 4. That wraps up the story of Cain, Abel, Cain's lineage, Lamech, and then the beginning of a new era with Seth. So we're going to get to chapter 5. And like I said, in chapter 5, it feels like Cain and Abel didn't even exist. All there is Adam, his wife, and Seth. And there's a lineage. And it looks a lot like the lineage of Cain. And we're going to talk about that in the next video. All right, hopefully that was informative for you. Give me a like, subscribe, all those things, and we'll see you in the next video.